All right, Sergio. Hey, man, thank you so much for coming on here and doing this. I really,
Wesley, my pleasure. I look forward to it. I love chatting about story and all kinds of art stuff. So
yeah.
yeah.
So, just real quickly, can you give us an introduction of who you are and how long have you been in the business of storyboard illustration?
Yeah. So, well, I'm Sergio, and I'm mainly been in story development and pre-production for film and animation. And just recently, so mostly in the story department. So I'm a story artist. It's a graphic medium, so I use various tools to like create images for people who don't know what that is. And then recently I've gotten into directing and some story development and production development. So that's mainly what I'm focusing on now. And I also am a founder of a visual storytelling community, and we run courses and classes to train people to get into the entertainment industry and kind of do what I do and also branch out into some other things. So that's how we met. And yeah, I'm happy that we found each other that way.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed your class so far. It's been pretty interesting to see you talk about story from a different perspective, from a visual storytelling perspective, as opposed to like a screenwriting perspective. And my biggest issue with, or the biggest takeaway that I'm having with this mentorship, is trying to kind of bridge these together through doing like a personal project. I
Yeah.
know you do like personal projects yourself, right? And you recommend that
Yeah.
your students do that. What has your experience been as far as like doing your own thing as opposed to doing things for other people?
Yeah, it's a struggle because it's something very personal, so it's challenging. You want to get things off the ground. So yeah, I mean, let me see. I don't know what kind of range your audience has, but just to describe to people, there's a difference between writing and creating stories, which is using the written word, and then actually making them into images, which is what the final filmmakers will have to do. And I've been part of that process for a long time. So the mentorship that you're talking about is part of the whole storyboardart.org group. And that's kind of a course where we lead people into different exercises. And a lot of them are focused on trying to turn their story ideas that are in their head or maybe on the written page or some kind of outline format into images, right? And then there's a language to that, which I don't think people they may not realize who are not in this kind of business or entertainment field. And so that language of communication with images is really unique. So when it comes to doing your own personal stuff, what the difference is when you're getting hired to do this, you usually have something to go on and a set style that a company might have already, or set series of characters, and you're there to execute and help the other directors and team come up with their idea. Now, if you're doing this on your own, you basically have to do all of that groundwork yourself. And people would be surprised how challenging that really is, because in a group setting, you're leaning on other people. So they already might have writers, they might have a concept artist that comes up with the idea. When you're doing it all on your own, you basically have to be the one that imagines all of that. You are the creator, right? You are the person that comes up with that stuff out of thin air. And there's a lot of like guessing and trial and error till you come up with a solution that you find, one that makes sense, logical sense visually, and also is entertaining for the user. Because I think there's an element of like a group participation when it comes to film and entertainment. Like you can make stuff for yourself, and that could, I would consider that more like a personal thing or a painting. If you're ever going to do any kind of like moving art or sequential images or any timed visual medium like a film, a movie, a short film, anything like that, animation, that takes a tremendous amount of effort, right? Just to do that, just the process is so labor intensive. So the idea is you're going to show that to other people and hopefully get some feedback. And it actually really is enjoyable, if you've ever done this, to see people's reactions to your own work. But at any rate, that process, because of how involved it is, I really recommend that people they go with that idea in mind. So the target is to create something entertaining, hopefully to say something, to have an opinion that that is widely recognized, but it doesn't have to be accepted. It doesn't have to be like if you're doing something, let's say, I don't know, could be political or, maybe controversial, whatever. It's personal. Like it just could be an opinion about whatever life thing that you've gone through. They don't have to agree with it, but you have to say something and have it communicate the idea. So if it's this, avant-garde stuff, I'm not necessarily into the experimental and non-linear kind of ideas, which can be very cool. I'm nothing against that. It's just that's not my cup of tea, because I want to be able to communicate to as many people as possible in the projects that I'm doing. So anyway, that was like a big roundabout way to say that it's super challenging to do this stuff, but it's totally worth it. I think it's just the most thrilling thing that you can be doing.
And so do you think that somebody who does like their own personal project, like you go through and create like the character concepts, you come up with like a little written script, and you come up with like a basic storyboard. Do you think that helps set somebody apart from just doing like kind of storyboards based on other people's scripts? Do you think that helps you differentiate yourself in the job market?
Yeah, I mean, you're putting yourself into another category if you're now the creator or the developer of those ideas. And it seems weird, but people will kind of typecast you, or they put you in a little box of the type of work that you're doing. So if you're hired to be just a story artist, you are there to execute probably an existing script and an existing project. You're part of a team. Now, that doesn't mean you can't bring ideas to the table. That's part of the job, right? That's something so really special about what we do as visual storytellers and story artists. But when you get into the area of actually conceptualizing and writing the idea from scratch, you become kind of in like a sub niche category. You're now like part of a creator, right? And that person, not everybody can really do that well, because it's just like anything. It's a muscle that you have to exercise and train and work till you get good at it, or your ideas get widely accepted, whatever benchmark you have for success. At any rate, yeah. So once you start doing more of that, people start looking at you as like, oh, this person can actually has the ability to come up with these ideas, and hopefully they're going to consider you for coming up with those concepts. For example, somebody who's already done this, like Quentin Tarantino, right, is pretty well known, pretty famous. Like, it's probably rare that somebody's going to say, I got this idea for the next Star Wars. Let's get Quentin Tarantino to do it. He'd probably say no, because what he does is come up with his own ideas, creates his own movies, writes them in the way that he likes, and he executes them. And so he's more of the creator own person. Now, if you get like a Spielberg, who doesn't necessarily, he does do that, but he's also has been like a hired gun for other films, then you get somebody that has a different skill set. And obviously, I guess I'm talking about these like huge bigwigs, but like Steven Spielberg has a lot of, he's also a creator, but in his early time as a director, like even Jaws, which was like a huge hit for him, like he wasn't necessarily the creator of that concept. He came on to the project and pushed it in the direction that it should go, right? That's why it was a success. So at any rate, in this day and age where like there's so many more outlets, and now the hot topic is like, the streaming services and what kind of new ideas are out there. Episodic development is really hot. I think there is a focus now on the creator who has come up with those ideas, right? And that gets really sexy, and people want to do it and get into that stuff, right? It's hard, and it's not an easy path to go down. But I think it's valid, and it also opens up more career opportunities, both financial and also just with actual jobs, right? So that's probably why a Spielberg can go back and forth, because he's so versatile. Whereas, well, to use my example here, Quentin Tarantino probably can do a James Bond movie if he wants to, right? But I doubt he would elect to pick that on his own,
Yeah, he does his own thing. So for a story artist that wants to be like a gun for hire, I know you're supposed to have, we've talked about it before in class, like you want to have like a kind of diverse portfolio of drama, action, comedy. I'm pretty sure you've answered in class before, but whenever you're putting a portfolio like that together, do you recommend that students go and look at a script of something that's already out there and take that and adapt like one scene for each of these storyboard parts, or do you um, or do you think that people should just like write their own and do their own thing?
Yeah, that's a good point. I think the getting a job on a story team is a challenging too. And there's a couple of things that I like you can kind of you have to take into account when you're going to apply for these things. So I consider it like you're checking off these boxes that people are looking for to get onto the team. So one of that is showing off your skills and showing off what you're actually capable of doing technically. So there's a drawing component, there's a technical component to using computers and programs. There's a presentation component to knowing what it is that they're looking for at a particular company or on a particular project or story team. But then there's also a creativity component, because this is a very unique position where you're very close to the pre-production and the development of the actual project. So you have a firsthand say in what happens in the scene, because you're essentially given the responsibility to develop those scenes and maybe more, right? Depending on the story that you're working on. At any rate, so you do want to show off that you have these skills. And the way to do that is by showing, now again, depending on the project. So if you're going to apply to a comedy movie, for example, it probably doesn't make sense to put a ton of drama stuff in there. You might put one or two to just show that you can do that. You have versatility, but then the focus should be showing off how good your gags are and how great your comedy is, because you really want to join up on that team. So you want to show off those skills, but then also show that you can come up with ideas, because you're going to be, that's part of the job. You really want to come up with the ideas out of the blue. There's a whole process to that, like doing research and then actually, trial and error. So it's not like you just have to have these magic powers that you're suddenly born with. No, I feel like you have to nurture these abilities, right? You can take existing material from other scripts or other stories. And I would, that can work as long as you adapt it. But like I've seen portfolios, for example, people will take like a Batman story and they'll put it in there, they'll board out something. The issue with that is that it becomes like the question comes, oh, did you work on that Batman TV show, or did you work on the Batman movies? And no, actually, I'm just using that as a reference. Oh, okay. Well, there's so much that's been done for that it might work against you. So it may not be the best idea to do that. Mm-hmm. People do, like for Pixar, if you're going to apply to a Pixar movie, you might do like Toy Story characters and put them in a scene. I wouldn't recommend that either, because you are showing something that the people in-house they're going to know that material way, way better than you. They just are, unfortunately. So it's probably better to show off what you can do and bring original things to the table. So if you are going to do something that's based on written material, I would probably adapt it. So what I've seen that is successful in that is like somebody takes a fairy tale that everybody knows, like Cinderella or whatever, but they make it into their own interpretation of that tale. And so you're not necessarily copying Disney's Cinderella, you're doing your own version, or putting it into a new world, right? Other things that might be good is that you, like why I mentioned James Bond. So you take that, but you do something that is totally your own, using that character or a kind of a spy character, but it's clearly identifiable as like you didn't work on the last Bond movie, for example, or you put your own spin on it. I personally would recommend that people do that, and I like to see that in other people's work. I do that myself as well, is put as much of my own stuff in the portfolio as I can, to show off like one, versatility, that I have ideas and that I've done things that I enjoy. And then also, if you're at this for a while, you're going to have material from the jobs that you worked on. So most likely you'll put those samples in there. That's kind of like a given. So I worked a lot at Lucasfilm and I was at Pixar for a while too. So those samples are in my portfolio, because I want people to know what I did at those companies, so that, one, it gives them a little bit of, like, what do you call that? Cred, I suppose, like that you're actually, a pro, and that you've done some of these things, and also shows that, you're able to complete professional work. But then, I pepper in my own stuff so that they know that I have other ideas, right?
So what did you work on at Pixar?
I was there briefly when they were when Brad Bird stepped in to revamp Ratatouille, and so I was in this weird transition phase when they were doing that, and I got called in to do which were essentially storyboards, but they were also redoing their internal like 3D pipeline. So the way that they actually executed their shots and their lighting and everything like that. So I was working with the tools team to create storyboards to actually board out their pipeline process, which was really fun. That was one of the first times I did something like that. And then meanwhile, I was seeing all the designs and stuff for Ratatouille, and then I think Brad Bird was rewriting stuff. Like shortly after that, I got called to do the Clone Wars project, so I jumped onto that. So yeah, Pixar was great, and it was kind of interesting for me to see that too, because they had removed I think they had been going for at least a year or so, and there's probably even more before that had developed from Ratatouille, but for whatever reason they didn't like the direction of that of how it was going. I don't exactly know why. I wasn't on the internal part of those discussions, but anyway, Brad Bird came in and he rewrote it. Like he basically wrote the way the movie turned out to be, and then they crewed up again and they started all over again. So pretty interesting how that came to be.
So whenever you're going into a situation like working on Ratatouille, it sounds like sometimes you can find yourself in a situation where you're boarding something out that is, in a sense, either that is still being written, or it will eventually be rewritten. So it's like there's a lot of times where you create stuff and it just kind of ends up just never being used, right?
Yeah. We say this a lot. Like your storyboards, the drawings that you create are expendable. They're just there as placeholders, and you should really think of them as that. And of course, every project's different, but this is kind of just a general statement that like what we create as story artists is there for inspiration, and it's there to serve a particular purpose, not necessarily as a final illustration for anything that's going to see the light of day or reach the public. They're super important. It's a super important process because you are laying out the blueprint for the project that you're working on, yet you are not doing the final pass. So there will usually be animators that come in, or if it's a live action movie, the live action actors and the cinematographer will actually film the shots. So nothing that we do when we're doing story work like that will necessarily see the light of day. It might read some kind of art book or whatever. But then the funny thing is that you're working at such a fast pace that the drawings are really sketchy most of the time. You might come up with a couple good ones that look pretty good on their own, but most of the time it's just the speed of it and what the style that you have to pump it out. Just fast lines, really expressive drawings, getting the attitude right, and maybe just throwing a couple tones in there. They end up looking like rough comic book illustrations, right? And then, sometimes if you're working on if you have an extended project like a live action feature or something, you might be able to do these like little concept boards, which can be more finished and add more color, which would probably still look like now like a finished comic book illustration instead of a rough one. But they're all pretty rough in general.
Okay. So whenever you went from, I'm assuming that you left Pixar because working on Star Wars was like your dream.
Yeah, well, and also it was just there was a contact there that asked me to submit my portfolio, and a good buddy of mine, and then it was a new show that was starting up. I didn't know anything about it. Obviously I knew Star Wars, but I didn't. They were and I knew the Mckenzie Clone Wars series. So if you guys remember the Cartoon Network, some people do, you can look it up, is the Mckenzie Tartakovsky did a Clone Wars thing when the prequels came out with George Lucas, and those were awesome. They were really good, really, really well received. And a lot of good people worked on that. At any rate, I guess inspired by those, they wanted to do a 3D animated series, and that's what George Lucas came up to do. So then they brought on Dave Filoni, who has now gone on to do like The Mandalorian and some other cool stuff. At any rate, it was all just super new. Like they didn't know how to produce this in a efficient way, and so the whole pipeline was being set up. Like the style was being set up. So it was already going for about a year when I came on. That's when they like started ramping up. And I kept asking, I remember the interview, it was really funny. I kept asking Dave and the producers and stuff, so can I see something? Can you show me a script? I want to see what you guys are working on. It was so top secret. They wouldn't show me anything. So I basically had to go in blind. I knew it was like a TV show. I knew it was Clone Wars, but I think they might've showed me a couple of designs, but I didn't see a script. I didn't see any tests, any story reels, nothing. They couldn't show me any of that stuff because it was all confidential, even in the interview. So then I had to basically accept, like, blindly, that this was something I'd be interested in. And I did. It turned out to be great. Actually, I was really happy to join on.
So in the process of working on that show, I assume the story, the amount of time the writers have to turn something around in order for it to get to you, in order for it to get to the next guy, they have to do it pretty quick. So do they usually write like the bulk of the story before anything gets done, and then they start building a pipeline around that?
Yeah, so it's a whole logistic operation to create these things. Normally, what they would do is they would have these like story conferences where they bring in a team of writers, and there was usually one or two lead writers. Most of the time, it was just one, but I think they had two at a certain point. Most shows work similar to this. So they have a team of writers that come in, and they hash out the arc of the season, which would be, I don't know, 10, depends on your show, but 10 to 20 episodes. And I think we had, like, forgot what it was now, but it might have been like 15 or 16 episodes a season. At any rate, they block out the outline of what the season will be, and then they assign to the writers their particular episodes. And then they might even, maybe they might hire out other episodes for other writers because there may not be enough time. So then the writers will go off on their own. And I don't know exactly how much time they're given, but I would assume it's about a month, maybe 6 weeks or so, maybe less. I don't know. 4 weeks, less than 4 weeks to write an episodic script, because there's still some back and forth there, is pretty fast. It's about we were getting like 25 and 30 page scripts, which we were always complaining about it, but because you only get about 21 minutes in the end, so you have to cut out a lot of that script. At any rate, that it's still hard work to write something like that, and so all of that would be scheduled in, and then the scripts would come in as the production would start up. So usually the first couple episodes for the season were already locked and approved, and that gets handed off to the story team, and then all the other pre-production stuff was ready to go, like models, sets, all the pipeline was in place before this actually happened. So when the story department gets there, they get a script, and it's usually run a series of approvals through the showrunner and lead, who could be, like, at that point it was like Dave Filoni, and then I don't think George saw the scripts until the very end, George Lucas. So then the story team will execute that script, and then what ends up happening, or at least on that particular production, there was a lot of back and forth between the story department, the directors, and even George Lucas at that point would come in there and make their comments. So what ends up happening is that script gets almost totally rewritten. It was actually very rare that a script that in the written form when it first started would be 80 to 90% represented on the final product. Like, it was almost like, to me, I would consider it like 60%. You'd be lucky if you got 60% in there, because you're changing dialogue, you're changing the order of the scenes, and that's all based on the story reels that get produced, and then the editorial process of, like, looking at it and rehashing things. So it's really, if you think about it, it's another writing process. At that point, the actual writers were not involved. Probably the head writer would come in and plus up some of the dialogue that was needed. But then at that point, it was in the hands of the directors, and they were the ones responsible to carry out the episodes.
Yeah, it seems like it can be an extremely stressful extremely stressful job to be a part.
Just talking about, if you break this down, I say this too, when I when I was younger, I would like complain about films that I saw. I'd be like, that movie sucks. I can't believe that this story is pathetic. How can these guys do this? I mean, you spend all this time and what a pathetic movie. And then when you actually like get into the business and you work on it, you're like, wow, this is really hard. and then I realized it's like, a couple of people said it, but I really believe it too. Is like, it's a real miracle that anything that you see on streaming, on any of the in the movie theaters, any platform, that it's a miracle that it gets made. It really is. Even the crappiest thing that you can possibly imagine, like it has gone through an enormous amount of effort to get to that point. Now, whether it's good, and so whether it's good or not, whoever has done their part to do that. Now, to do that, and like I said, it's a miracle just to get to that point. To do that and actually make it good and make it entertaining, then it's like a double miracle, because that's when like true artisans are putting their heart and soul into every single step, and you're all in sync with the team and the production. And it's just, you're talking about hundreds of people. You're talking about probably millions of dollars if you're working on a big production, and years of labor, and then and then it comes out there, and then somebody will go to the theater and be like, this movie sucks. So then it's really hard. It's just the most challenging thing, and it is stressful. It is it is intense. So that's one thing that I don't think people realize. I was talking to some people this week too. Is like production work is very demanding. It is very, very demanding, and even on the story artists. So that's why you have to be highly trained, highly skilled, have a lot of knowledge and practice behind it. And then you slowly build it up as you do it, and you learn as you're working on these projects, and you learn from others. That's one of the ways to learn. That's why we created a mentorship, so you can be mentored by other people, right? And so as you're doing this, you get better at it, and then hopefully you'll get better with that execution. But it is hard. The deadlines are really tight. You always have to try and do your best, or you want to, just out of professional pride, knowing that your work is going to be seen by potentially millions of people. So you would do the best possible work until the last final minute that you had to turn it in, just because you didn't want it to get to do any less, basically, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh man, yeah, it seems like a lot. So have you made your kid watch Clone Wars 1,000 times yet?
Not yet. I have the funny thing, now that it's on like other platforms and other streaming, other people have mentioned that they've gotten to the show, and they're like, hey man, I saw this thing you worked on years ago. It was pretty good. And, things that I've directed to, like for Rebels and some of the recent stuff, like, oh yeah, not bad. My kid really loves it. And like, they'll sit down and watch it. So a couple friends that have gotten into that. My kid is pretty young, so she's not into that yet. Okay. And but yeah, sure, I'd love to see her reaction. I think it's good to get other people's opinions on stuff. And sometimes watching that stuff, you get like cringe. You're like, oh man, I remember when that happened. Sometimes you're surprised too. You're like, hey, that turned out pretty good. I didn't remember it was like that.
So are you going to be bummed if she ends up not being a Star Wars kid?
No, not at all. I think I would much rather. I'm a fan of just like creativity and originality. So if anybody who's doing new stuff, I'm always like a big supporter and fan of people, doing their own thing. I love the other franchise stuff too, but like I said, it's just so hard to come up with new ideas that if anybody does anything fresh and original, I'm a big fan.
So is there anything that's on your radar right now as far as like movies or TV shows that you've kept up with that you're like, every time you watch them, you're like, oh man, this is really inspiring. It's getting me thinking about things differently.
Yeah, I mean, nothing in particular. Like, there's not like one series that I follow and say, oh yeah, this is the one. But it's almost like just a big conglomerate of everything that's out there to get inspired by. Like, I think the most recent one that I saw that I thought was really, really cool, that I wasn't expecting, was The Queen's Gambit on Netflix, which is that chess, story of the chess prodigy girl. And I just wasn't expecting the that storyline to be entertaining. And so they really made something very cool out of chess, which, if you think about it, to me, is like the most boring thing I could probably think of, is looking at a board and moving little pieces around, right? But they made it just so dramatic. They were able to dramatize it really well, and there's all this backstory that goes on. So it's beautiful, and it was incredibly well executed. I thought, you know, cinematography and everything was great. There's a couple of movies that I saw that I pick up little things from different projects that I really like. So there's one, Hell or High Water, that stars Jeff Bridges, that I was just like sitting down one day and it came up on my feed for, I think it was Netflix or Amazon, one of these. And I was like, okay, I'll watch this. And man, I was glued in there for like as soon as like the first 10 minutes happened, I was like, wow, this film is really good. Like, it was so beautifully shot. That was the one thing that I was really impressed by. And I looked up the cinematographer, and he was like, apparently came from, obviously the director's like awesome, amazing guy, juggernaut, to be able to pull something like that off. And, but then I really particularly like the cinematography. So that was one thing that I kind of responded to in that movie. Mm-hmm. And what was funny, then I went digging around behind the scenes. Like, I didn't hear much about that film, so it was just came up on my feed. None of my buddies had told me, hey, you got to watch this film. Mm-hmm. But I really loved the story and how it was done. And so even going down behind the scenes, like there's one interview that I found of Jeff Bridges where he was talking about the process of the movie. And he's like, yeah, reading the script, you know, this is great. And going through the process, he's like he was just responding. He said, yeah, this could be a real good one. And, you know, this is coming from a guy who's probably worked on hundreds of films in his career. And to say that about a project that he's on, and he was right. I certainly agree with him. That film was really good. I recommend it to everybody.
Yeah, I've seen that movie. Was really good. Didn't he do Sicario? Or he did, what were the other movies that he did?
Oh man, I could tell you in a sec, but he did, I think I remember looking him up, and he did a couple of like dramas before, and then somehow he's a British director, is he British or Australian? I can't remember. I'll tell you the name in a second. But that he was doing a very American Texas film. And so that to me, so David Mckenzie is this director, and I'm looking at my IMDb right now. But yeah, he did a couple of, he's only done like 3 or 4 films. So he did a couple independent films. Startup was like, anyway, back in 2013, he did something. And then it seems like his path was to, you know, just springboard off of what he did before. And then he finally did Hell or High Water in 2016, which, so this guy is, you know, he's from England. That's what I thought. He's a British director. But I mean, you know, I don't know his background necessarily, but I would assume that any guy from England would really have to do strong research on a very American Texas film. Like, it was shot in Texas. Well, it wasn't shot in Texas, but it takes place in Texas. And I think they shot it actually in New Mexico. At any rate, you know, the accents, the actors, the you know, just the vernacular that the characters, like I would never have guessed that a foreign director directed that film. You know what I mean? So that to me, I was like, pro, man. This guy was just hats off, because that I'm pretty sure that dude sat down, he did his research, he read about this, you know, the time of life, you know, the style of how people speak, and, you know, cowboy hats and the costumes and everything else, right? Not that it's a period piece, but it's like you want to convince people that you're in the state of Texas, right? And so that takes research, right? Just like anything.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I would have never thought that either, because I actually live in Texas, and I love any movie that has like Texas as like a spotlight for it, you know, like the who was the guy who did El Mariachi? I can't believe I'm forgetting his name.
It was Robert Rodriguez.
Yeah, like the films that he's done that he's set like in Texas or in Mexico, those are some of my favorites. You know? Yeah,
and I love the Coen brothers, and I think they're, if I remember correctly, I think they're from the East Coast, but they're like really well known for having this Americana, like, you know, obviously in their own unique way, but the films that they make that have those storylines, like well, Raising Arizona is one, although it's not necessarily an Arizona there's no like Arizonian accents or anything in that film, but the satire is very much American. They did the Ballad of Buster Scruggs recently, and so they're kind of well known for. And then it's like No Country for Old Men, that was shot in that was placed in Texas. And so Fargo, like all of these films are very unique to the story and kind of in a U.S. centric way, but that's where you get into the story. And I just feel like, man, how do these people, like I wouldn't have to do that. Like I grew up in California. So like if I had to shoot a film from New York, like I better do my research about like, go there, talk to people, figure out, so that was that's part of what we do as artists and filmmakers. And I think the more authentic you can make it, the more that's going to, resonate with your viewers. I heard a cool story about the film Coco from Pixar. And, that's that like a Mexican story. That was another story that surprised me. I thought, this is just going to be another, kind of run of the mill Pixar film. And I saw it and I was like, whoa, this film is amazing. It's really, really creative, really entertaining. I really liked it. Animation was awesome. So, I know some of the guys who worked on it and they're just from all over. And you would think these guys are all Mexican, but, but no, they're from every possible way. And what I heard, somebody made a comment. I think one of the story guys was like, they were really proud of how detailed they were in their research and their investigation to make it authentic. Right. And I laugh every time you get this old grandma throwing a sandal at his kid and, stuff like that, which it's actually very Latin and very, very Mexican. It was like these little bits that are really cute that I thought was very funny.
Yeah, another director that is super detailed with his work that I know you're a fan of is Kubrick.
Oh yeah,
you put The Shining as one of your top favorite movies, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I love it. I mean, he's just amazing, and I think a lot of people put him up as one of the greatest directors. And that's debatable. Everybody has their own fans or their own favorites, right? But I think one thing you cannot deny when you look at a Kubrick film is just the artistry, how beautifully shot it is, how wonderfully constructed the film, the actual sequences are. The acting, I think that probably the level of expectation that guy probably had, the weight that he had with the actors there, like everything is full. I don't think I remember a Kubrick film where like an actor felt out of place or something. Like everything was just where it should be, right? And I heard he was pretty hard, especially on The Shining. I've seen like some behind the scenes stuff where he's really hard on the actors, particularly the girl, what's her name?
Wendy.
Shelley Duvall, I think.
Shelley Duvall, yeah.
Yeah. So at any rate, I mean, he got the performance that he needed. So, and then, some of his films are super dense too. I guess that's another thing that I think people may or may not respond to. I'm more like a film fan. If you ask the average, film goer, they'd be like, I don't get that, 2001 film. I don't, okay, it looks cool, but I don't get it. But I dig it. I sit there like, oh, this is so interesting. Wow, how cool. Or like Clockwork Orange, right? Is a very like interesting social commentary, and people might get obviously turned off by that. It's not necessarily I wouldn't think it would be for a wide appeal, but he was able to have a fan base because of who he was and like kind of the fame that he built up when he was a filmmaker. So I think that's totally admirable, as somebody who appreciates that stuff. That's like, oh yeah, this guy's amazing.
Yeah, that's what I think is so amazing about his movies is, like you said, they're so dense. Like whenever you watch The Shining, I remember when I saw The Shining when I was like, I don't know, I was like 12 or 13 or something the first time I saw it. But even when he goes and he just sits down in the office and he's talking to the hotel owner or director, you can just, there's no creepy music going on. There's nothing really, but there's something off. You don't know what it is. I don't know. I don't even know how to quantify it. Like I've seen so many people that will break down and they'll find like the hidden subtext in The Shining, and everybody kind of has their own take on it,
right?
Which is all really fascinating, and I think it definitely adds to it. But man, it really draws you in and makes you feel like you're in this secluded place. I guess because a lot of the shots you don't have outside of like maybe the main area. You don't have windows. You know, everything just feels like a maze. Like it's very
Yeah.
constructed. You know?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's great. And he certainly had a command. And everybody that I've researched or read about, working on a Kubrick movie, they had just the highest respect for this guy. Like he was, he certainly was, like, carried his weight. Like everybody wanted to work with him, and like everybody's on point. I heard that about James Cameron too. Is like he gets a bad rap for being a hard ass on his films, right? And he probably is. I've heard stories of like him just, well, let's just say he's been super demanding on a lot of his films, right? But even he said it. He was like, well, the people that I work with know that that's what's expected, and they come back. Like they, so he was, which basically I think what I interpreted that he was saying was basically like that, people, they want to be in that environment because they know the results they're going to get are also really high quality. It's styles. I'm not one of these guys that appreciate somebody who's yelling at you in your face, but I don't think it's particularly necessary. I hope I wouldn't do that if I ever had the opportunity to direct a film, but I think there is something to be said about the results, right?
So in a way, you kind of have to be a masochist in order to be a story artist.
You got to love this. You really to get into something that is really challenging and difficult to get into in the first place, and then how difficult it really is to actually make. You can be successful. Like there's a career in this. Like back in the day, your parents would be like, what? You're going to be a filmmaker? I can't believe artist. You're crazy. Go get go work at a bank or whatever. Be a doctor and all that kind of cliche stuff. Nowadays, I hope people realize things have changed, right? Video game artists are making way more money than any banker could be pulling in a lot of places, right? And filmmakers and all that stuff. It's like there's plenty of career choices in what we do, but it is really hard. Like you have to dedicate. It's not a clock in, clock out type of job. You have to be in it and want it and study and make this your passion. And if it is, it will come easier to you by doing that. Otherwise, you're just kind of half-assing it, and you're probably not going to get the traction that you want or the success that you want. I don't think my argument is you probably won't even enjoy it. If you don't really love it, then yeah, you should go do something else. Go get a normal desk job. But the reason people come into this business is probably because they were fans of movies and art when they were a kid. And this is like what they've been dreaming about doing. And it really is fulfilling that way. So if you're working at something you really love, is it really work? And yeah, there are times where it does become hard, and you certainly want to get paid, but you want to enjoy your life while you're doing the stuff that you do, right? And I think for a lot of people, that's what it is in the entertainment business.
So can you speak a little bit on like that sacrifice, that personal sacrifice? Because like in my position is that I do freelance illustration. That's what it is, and I'm doing now. I'm trying to spring off and gain other skills, learn new things. That's why I wanted to take your course, obviously. But sometimes it can kind of get to a point where you're like, you can end up sacrificing maybe more than you should.
Oh yeah.
And I think that I think you've mentioned it before, and I know it's probably kind of a personal topic, but you said that I think you married late. You've obviously had a kid late. What is
yeah.
your parents as far as that? Or, I assume you're probably like in your 40s, something like that.
Yeah, I'm 43 now, and so I've been hustling for a while.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's sacrifices you make. I remember, my relationships have suffered because of the choices that I make. I've had a lot. I've had. Well, they seem like a lot because they hurt. When you have hard breakups and stuff like that, and partly because I'm so dedicated to my work, or my mind is somewhere else that I'm not paying attention to my significant other. At any rate, finally figured that out, and then I got married to the right person, and then everything is falling into place. So I'm a big believer in that. Yeah, you got to have balance, because I've been burned out too, both health wise, like physically, work wise. So I tell people, and especially young guys coming in, you know, students who want to come into this, is like, have a balance in what you're doing, because I feel it's really important. I didn't have that concept very clear when I was younger. So I would go so hard on something and I would neglect other things. Like I was, you know, and there's a trade-off. So there's consequences to everything. I guess one of the benefits was I was really focused on my craft and I got, you know, good at it. And the other things was maybe I was missing out on some life experiences that I probably should have had. And now what I like to do is just incorporate those life experiences. And I tell people too, if you want to be an artist, and you want to have some creativity, you need input to have the output. And I've learned this from others too. I didn't come up with that. It's basically, as you live, you're going to be able to come up with stories and just the way you feel and the experiences. So let's say, yeah, everybody's gone through a bad breakup, right? You have a girlfriend or a boyfriend that like didn't work out, and you remember how that feels, and see if you can explain that or show that to other people in your stories. And that that grounds your stories into things. And that goes with every experience. And I'm a big fan of showing the emotion and communicating the emotion. So my argument is, if you can communicate the emotion, everything else is secondary, and you got them. So like, it doesn't matter to me. Yes, everything is important, but like production value can be less, or like, you know, if you're doing an animated project, like maybe the actual animation is a little bit stiff or whatever. But if you got them on the actual emotional beat of the scene, then I think you've hooked your audience well. Now, if you can have all the other stuff too, then you have something really awesome. But yeah, life experience is really important, and balance, I think, is really important. So I don't want to die with any regrets. And so I have, like, you know, everybody's got their little bucket list, and I have mine, and I want to kind of check off the things that I'm into. And, you know, for the most part, I've done pretty good personally on my personal goals. So I really enjoy painting. I love, you know, just being saturated with art and media. The friends and people in my life are all, you know, many of them are very creative, and they all, you know, kind of have that mindset. And that's really fun to be around. So that keeps me going and inspiring.
Cool, man. Like I said, I really appreciate you taking the time to do this.
Yeah.
Just real quick, I mean, like, what kind of advice do you have for somebody that's trying to get into? I mean, I know you kind of covered it over the course of the interview, but is there anything in particular that you didn't mention that you think is good advice for story?
Yeah, you know, I've come across a couple of people that, and I was not like this, so it's sometimes foreign to me to think about this concept. I knew exactly what I wanted to do really young, and I had a just headstrong, stubborn focus in order to get there. And that was just to be an artist. I just wanted to work and become an artist and, you know, make a living doing my art. Like, I didn't want to do anything else. I wasn't going to be satisfied. I knew I wasn't going to be satisfied doing anything else. So there was no backup plan. I was not an architect and then got into art afterwards, or no, it was like, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go and do it because I really want to do it. So I'm like stubborn that way. So, but I've come across people that they have a kind of a foggy idea about where they want to go. Like, I think I like art, and I think I like drawing, and I think I like film, but they're like not really committed. So my recommendation would be this: it's just decide what you want to do, commit to it, and be very strategic about how you go about it, because this is especially important if you're coming at it later on. Like, I kind of started in my early, you know, well, from high school, I went into like art school. And so like in my early 20s, I was already trying to get work as an artist with my portfolio under my arm kind of thing. And so I didn't realize it at the time, but I had room to like fail and like, you know, hit my head against the wall. But if you're like now my age in your 40s or whatever, coming into the business, which is totally fine, that there's nothing stopping somebody from doing that. But that my recommendation there would be, it's especially important to have everything just very clear, because at that point, I don't recommend wasting any time. Like you don't want to like hit the wall and then you're gonna, because what I've seen happen is that people get frustrated and they give up. And I hate to see that. I want people, I know everybody has a story to tell, and I want to see that creativity in people. So I think if you're going to do that, shoot for success. You can get there. It is possible to be a successful artist and getting paid doing the things that you love. It is absolutely possible, right? So you just have to engineer how you're going to get there. Some people have to work a day job, and then in their nights, they gotta find a way to hustle to get that extra time and do it. Other people might be starting early, but then there you go, my friend. If you're a young kid doing this stuff, get your plan in order, to make it so that you're tracking your progress. You're going to make leaps, and, find a mentor, get somebody who's going to point you in the right direction, and maybe point out some like pitfalls or booby traps that you're going to have to jump over or avoid to get to your goal, right? That always helps. Those people in my life have been just the most valuable thing ever. So yeah, those are some of the things I would recommend people do if they want to get into this. Above all, just know that it is possible. This is not like the dark ages of before, where there was a very select few of people. And if you only lived in that particular market, or you had a family member, or you knew some like direct connection of somebody who was in the film business or entertainment or video games or whatever, that you would be able to get in. That's not the case now. You can live in like the most remote part of the globe, and as long as you are able to amass the skills through all of the resources that we have now, to internet and connections and meeting people online and even texting people, and you can actually travel and physically go. I mean, pandemic aside, you can still travel and stuff. There's many more opportunities for people to do that now. So I feel like the excuses are getting less and less. So yeah, just go for it. The only thing you can do is win, right?
Yeah, for sure, man. Cool. Thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and now, and thanks to all the 0 people that showed up to watch this. But usually people check it out when it's posted on YouTube. So anyway, yeah, it was awesome chatting with you.
Okay, Wesley, great. Thanks for inviting me.